Caleb stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. The early morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his high-rise apartment in downtown Chicago. At 38, Caleb was the kind of man who exuded power. His sharp jawline and tall frame made him appear every bit the successful CEO he was. He had a high-profile job at his family's logistics company, Sterling Logistics, a name synonymous with wealth and success in the city. He wasn't just successful, Caleb was untouchable. He lived in a penthouse, drove an expensive car, and had the world's most beautiful women at his fingertips. Or at least, that's how it felt. He turned to Jessica, his assistant, still in bed behind him, watching him with lazy eyes. Jessica was beautiful, young, ambitious, and more than willing to satisfy Caleb's ever-growing ego. "Do you have to go?" she purred, stretching her arms above her head. "We had a good time, didn't we?" Caleb glanced at her, a half-smile on his face. "You know the drill. I've got a wife who thinks I'm still her perfect husband." Jessica's eyes flickered with a mix of annoyance and amusement. "You don't deserve her." Caleb chuckled. "I know, but she's good for business. Keeps the image intact. And besides, I promised her this would be the last year we're together." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "You promised her that last year." Caleb winked as he pulled on his jacket. "Next month. I'll finally be free, Jess. Just a few more weeks." He paused, looking at his reflection one last time. "You're worth the wait." He kissed her on the forehead, grabbed his keys, and left the apartment, his mind already shifting to the day ahead. Another round of meetings, another full calendar, and then back home to his dutiful wife. But today would not be the same. As Caleb drove through the rain-soaked streets of Chicago in his Bentley, a nagging feeling tugged at him. It wasn't guilt, it never was. But there was something unsettling in the air. Something had changed. His phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. It was a missed call from Audrey, his wife. Audrey. Sweet, devoted Audrey. His mind flicked back to their early years together. She had been his rock. Quiet, graceful, and always present when needed, even when he wasn't. But she had changed too, no longer just a trophy wife. Audrey had become more aware, more distant, more calculating in her own way. "She probably needs something," Caleb muttered to himself, dismissing the call as he approached his gated estate on the outskirts of the city. The heavy iron gates usually opened automatically, but today they didn't. The gate remained shut. "Damn it," Caleb cursed, rolling down his window to punch in the security code. His fingers typed the numbers. 1985, his birth year. Access denied. He tried again, frustration building as the gates remained locked. He slammed his hand against the intercom button. "Audrey, the gate is stuck. Open it up." Silence. Then, a faint crackle through the static. Nothing. Caleb honked his horn, impatiently pressing the button again. The gates groaned open, but it was too late. Something was off. As he parked in the driveway, the air felt wrong. The house, once warm with laughter and the aroma of Audrey's morning coffee, stood silent, cold. Caleb's boots clicked against the marble floors as he stepped inside. "Audrey," he called. No response. The house was eerily quiet. He walked through the hallway. The grand piano, the vintage paintings, the Persian rug, everything was gone. Panic set in. This wasn't a robbery. No one would steal Audrey's family heirlooms. But the house? The house was empty. "Audrey!" Caleb shouted again, his voice filled with a rising tension. He ran upstairs, the thud of his boots echoing through the empty space. Audrey's side of the closet was completely empty. Her clothes, her shoes, even her jewelry was gone. His breath quickened. What the hell is happening? Caleb rushed downstairs, checking every room. Nothing. The kitchen was bare, save for a single, elegant envelope resting on the center of the granite countertop. His hands shook as he picked it up, recognizing the delicate handwriting. Caleb was scrawled on the front. He opened it quickly. Inside, there was a legal document, a divorce petition. His heart raced as he flipped over the document. There was a photo attached. It was grainy, taken in low light, but unmistakable. Caleb and Jessica, leaving the Four Seasons just a few weeks ago. His arm was around her waist, and they were laughing. On the back of the photo, a time and date. Deck 14, 10:42 p.m. Shit, Caleb whispered. The realization hit him like a truck. She knew everything. Caleb wasn't the type of man who got sad. No, Caleb got angry. His entire empire, his wealth, his power, his freedom, was built on the assumption that he could do whatever he wanted without consequence. But this was different. You think you can just leave? He shouted at the empty house. You think you can walk out on me? Caleb reached for his phone, dialing Audrey's number over and over again, but it kept going straight to voicemail. No answer. He grabbed his keys, storming out of the house, fueled by rage. He needed to regain control. He needed to find Audrey and fix this. But something told him it was already too late. The war had already begun. Caleb slammed the car door, his fists clenched as he gripped the steering wheel. His mind raced through every possible scenario. The photo, the divorce papers. Audrey had planned this, carefully orchestrated it. And now, as he drove through the streets of Chicago, all he could think about was how quickly his world was crumbling. His empire, his wealth, his control, everything was slipping through his fingers. He had never seen Audrey like this. The quiet, accommodating woman he had married, who had always been content to play the role of the perfect wife, was gone. In her place was a calculated woman who had bided her time, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy everything he had built. And now, in one fell swoop, she was taking it all away. He pulled up to his office building, the one place he always felt like a king. The Sterling Logistics headquarters towered in front of him, its sleek glass and steel exterior gleaming under the gray sky. The building had always been a symbol of his power, of his dominance over the industry. But today, it felt different. Today, it felt like a prison. As he walked through the revolving doors, the usual welcoming smiles from the receptionists and junior staff were absent. The lobby was cold, sterile, like a morgue. The air felt thick with an unspoken tension. Caleb's shoes clicked against the marble floor, the sound echoing in the silence. He felt the eyes of the employees on him, but not with the usual admiration. No, today it was pity. And something else, something worse. He headed for the elevator, bypassing the small talk and forced pleasantries. His fingers brushed the button for the top floor. As the elevator ascended, the silence was deafening. Caleb's reflection in the mirrored walls of the elevator looked unfamiliar to him. His sharp features seemed to have aged years in the last few hours. His jaw, once confident and strong, now looked hollow. His eyes, usually sharp with determination, were clouded with anger and fear. The elevator chimed, and the doors opened to the executive floor. Caleb stepped out into the hallway, his gaze flicking toward his office. But something was wrong. The door was ajar, and there was no one inside. The usual buzz of activity in the executive suite was absent. The staff was nowhere to be seen. He walked slowly toward his office, his heart pounding in his chest. He opened the door, expecting to find Jessica or one of his other assistants, but the room was empty. His desk, once a symbol of his success, now looked barren, as if someone had already cleared it out. His computer was gone, his files were missing, and the usual stack of paperwork was nowhere to be found. The room felt hollow, like the walls were closing in on him. Caleb's stomach churned. He walked over to the window, staring out at the city below. The skyline, once a source of pride, now seemed distant and unreachable. He could hear the faint hum of the city's traffic, but it felt like background noise to the storm raging in his mind. His empire was falling apart, and the worst part was that he couldn't stop it. As he turned away from the window, he saw the door to the conference room open. Jessica stepped out, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. She didn't look at him. Instead, she turned toward the hallway and began to walk away. Caleb stepped forward, his voice rising as he called her name. "Jessica," he barked, but she didn't stop. She didn't even acknowledge him. The anger that had been building inside him exploded, and he grabbed her arm, spinning her around to face him. "Jessica, what the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice low and threatening. She looked up at him, but there was no warmth in her eyes, only fear. "You're done, Caleb," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "You don't even know what's happening, do you?" Caleb's grip on her arm tightened. "What the hell are you talking about?" She pulled her arm away, taking a step back. "You think you've been controlling everything, but you haven't. Audrey has been controlling you the whole time." His breath caught in his throat. "What? What do you mean?" Jessica took a deep breath, her voice steady but filled with an undeniable sense of finality. "She's been planning this. Everything. She's been gathering evidence against you for years. The fraud, the embezzlement, the shell companies. And now she's got you exactly where she wants you." Caleb's mind raced as the pieces began to fall into place. Audrey had known. She had always known. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had underestimated her. He had thought she was just a trophy wife, a mere accessory to his success. But she had been playing the long game, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He turned to the door, his heart pounding in his chest. "Where is she? Where's Audrey?" Jessica shook her head, a look of pity crossing her face. "She's already gone. And so are you." The words stung more than any physical blow could. Caleb stood there, frozen, as the weight of Jessica's words sank in. His entire life had been a lie. His empire, his wealth, his reputation, all of it was slipping through his fingers. And Audrey? Audrey was the one pulling the strings. As Jessica walked away, Caleb felt his world collapse around him. He was no longer the king of his empire. He was just a man, alone and broken, facing the consequences of his actions. And in that moment, he realized that the battle he had thought was over was only just beginning. Caleb's world had become a blur of chaos, and no matter how fast he tried to outrun it, he couldn't escape the crushing weight of his reality. His breath came in shallow gasps as he stormed through the empty halls of his office building, desperate for answers he knew would only lead to more humiliation. He felt like a stranger in his own skin. The cocky, self-assured man who had once walked these halls as if he owned them now seemed like a shadow of himself. His arrogance had been stripped away, replaced with a sense of vulnerability he had never known. Every door he passed felt like it was closing in on him, trapping him in a cage of his own making. As he reached the elevator, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, another message from Jessica. His heart skipped a beat, but he quickly dismissed the thought. What more could she possibly have to say? After everything that had happened, after the betrayal, he couldn't care less about her excuses. He punched the button for the underground parking garage, watching the numbers light up above the elevator door. He needed to leave. He needed to get out of this building, away from the suffocating pressure of failure. His mind kept replaying the events of the morning, each detail sharpening his sense of impending doom. The elevator doors slid open, and Caleb stepped out into the cold, sterile parking garage. His Bentley was parked in its usual spot, but today, it felt like just another symbol of his lost status. He walked toward it, every step heavy with regret. His fingers gripped the key fob, but before he could unlock the car, a voice broke through the silence. "Mr. Sterling." Caleb turned, his pulse quickening. The voice was low, authoritative, and unmistakably unfamiliar. Standing in front of him was a man in a dark suit, his face expressionless, his posture rigid. "Can I help you?" Caleb asked, trying to mask the unease in his voice. His gaze flicked to the parking lot, searching for any sign of the man's intentions. The man took a step forward, holding out a badge. "FBI, I need to speak with you." The world seemed to slow as Caleb's stomach twisted. The words felt like a punch to the gut, and for the first time in his life, Caleb didn't feel like the one in control. He had been the king of his empire, a titan of industry, and now he was standing face to face with the law, his empire crumbling at his feet. "What's this about?" Caleb managed to choke out, his voice barely a whisper. The man's cold eyes never left him. "We're investigating your company, Mr. Sterling," the agent replied, his tone matter of fact. "Fraud, embezzlement, and your wife has been a very helpful witness." Caleb's mind spun. Audrey. She had gone to the authorities. She had already handed over the evidence. He felt the ground shift beneath him, as if the very foundations of his life were collapsing. The agent took a step closer, and Caleb instinctively stepped back. "Where's the rest of your team?" Caleb demanded, trying to regain some semblance of control. "I need to talk to my legal team. This is a misunderstanding." The agent's expression didn't change. "We'll be taking your devices and any physical files, and we'll need to speak with you at the station. Your assets are being frozen, Mr. Sterling. You'll need to come with us." Caleb's vision blurred. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind couldn't seem to catch up. He felt trapped, like a mouse caught in a snare, with no way out. His phone buzzed again, but he ignored it. He didn't want to know who it was. Nothing mattered anymore. Not his wealth. Not his power. Everything he had built was slipping away. The agent stepped forward, reaching for Caleb's phone, but Caleb jerked it out of his reach. "Don't touch my phone," he growled, his voice low and menacing. He wasn't used to being powerless. He wasn't used to feeling like this. "I don't have time for this, Mr. Sterling," the agent said, his voice colder now. "Come with me. You're under investigation for more than just financial crimes. We'll be pressing charges for wire fraud, money laundering, and possible racketeering." Caleb's heart raced. Money laundering. Racketeering. The words felt foreign in his ears, like they belonged to someone else. He wasn't a criminal. He was just a man who had made a few mistakes, who had lived his life by his own rules. But now those rules had betrayed him. "I didn't do anything illegal," Caleb protested, his voice cracking. "I didn't steal anything." The agent didn't respond. He simply motioned for Caleb to follow him. With each step Caleb took, the weight of his situation pressed harder on his chest. He felt the cold metal doors of the garage closing in on him as they walked toward the exit, his legs feeling like they were made of lead. As they exited the building, Caleb's mind raced. Audrey had known. She had planned this. She had outplayed him at every turn. And now, it was too late to fix any of it. The car ride to the station was a blur. Caleb sat in the back of the unmarked FBI vehicle, staring out the window as the city passed by, oblivious to his turmoil. He had been so sure that he could control everything, so sure that his wealth and power would shield him from consequences. But as the vehicle turned the corner and headed toward the federal building, Caleb realized just how far he had fallen. He was no longer the man who had everything. He was the man who had nothing. And all of it, his empire, his power, his reputation, was slipping through his fingers, never to be reclaimed. Caleb's mind spun in a daze as the car rolled through the streets, each passing block a reminder of everything he had lost and everything he still stood to lose. His hands were clammy, his heart pounding in his chest as if it wanted to break free. The steady hum of the car's engine did nothing to drown out the pounding in his head. He was the king, or at least he had been. Now he was a criminal, a man on the verge of losing everything he had built, a man who had overplayed his hand and was about to pay the price. The realization stung, sharp and painful. The FBI car pulled up to the federal building, its sleek glass facade standing tall and imposing against the gray Chicago sky. Caleb felt his stomach churn as the doors of the vehicle opened. The agent stepped out first, motioning for Caleb to follow. He had no choice. His world had shrunk down to this single, inescapable moment. The building loomed ahead of him, a symbol of authority and consequence. As Caleb stepped out onto the sidewalk, he felt the eyes of the world on him. He imagined the news outlets were already circulating the story. CEO of Sterling Logistics under investigation for embezzlement and fraud. He imagined the whispers, the speculation, the judgment. Inside, the air was cold and sterile, the harsh fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Caleb was led down a long corridor, the sound of his footsteps echoing off the walls. Every door he passed felt like a reminder of how far he had fallen. From boardrooms and luxury offices to this, the depths of legal limbo. They reached a small interrogation room at the end of the hall. The door clicked shut behind him with a finality that made Caleb's skin crawl. He took a seat at the metal table, his hands trembling in his lap as he stared at the man who sat across from him. Agent Harris, the FBI agent who had introduced himself earlier, sat with a stack of paperwork in front of him. Caleb's thoughts raced, but he struggled to form any coherent argument. He had always been the one who had the answers, who had control over every situation. But now, in this cold, gray room, he was powerless. He had no choice but to sit there and wait for the inevitable. The agent's calm demeanor only made the situation more suffocating. So, Agent Harris began, leaning forward. "We have a lot to talk about, Mr. Sterling." Caleb opened his mouth to speak, but his throat was dry. He closed it, swallowing hard. The silence between them stretched, thick and uncomfortable. He was used to being in control, used to calling the shots. But not here. Not now. "You're under investigation for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy, Mr. Sterling," Harris continued, flipping through the papers on the table. "The amount you've taken, it's—" "I didn't steal anything," Caleb interrupted, his voice hoarse. "I didn't embezzle. You don't understand. It's all legal." Harris cut him off, his voice unyielding. "The evidence says otherwise. We have financial records, transactions, internal documents from your company. You've been manipulating funds for years, Mr. Sterling. And your wife, she's been a very valuable witness in this case." Caleb's stomach churned at the mention of Audrey's name. She was the one who had betrayed him. She was the one who had gone behind his back and gathered all the evidence. She had set him up, and now she was watching him burn from the sidelines. "She's lying," Caleb muttered, more to himself than to the agent. "She's trying to destroy me. She's been planning this for months." No, for years." Harris didn't respond immediately. Instead, he pushed a piece of paper across the table toward Caleb. It was a photo, grainy and blurry, but unmistakable. Caleb stared at it. It was him, standing outside of a warehouse, speaking to a man he didn't recognize. "Do you recognize this man?" Harris asked. Caleb looked at the photo for a long moment before shaking his head. "No," he said, trying to sound confident. "I don't know him." The agent's expression remained unchanged. "This is an image from a private surveillance camera, Mr. Sterling. It's dated 2 weeks ago. We have more photos, videos, transactions." Caleb's mind raced. He had been so careful. How had they gotten this close? How had Audrey, his quiet, timid wife, outsmarted him at every turn? "Listen," Caleb said, his voice rising. "This is all just a misunderstanding. I didn't do anything wrong. I was just trying to keep the business afloat. I'm not the bad guy here." Harris looked at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, he stood up and walked to the door. "You'll have your chance to speak with your lawyer," he said. "For now, you're under arrest." Caleb felt the words hit him like a physical blow. Arrest. He was being arrested. The man who had spent his life building an empire, who had thought himself untouchable, was now facing the consequences of his actions. "Wait," Caleb shouted as Harris opened the door. "I can fix this. I can make this right. I have money. I can pay you off. Just tell me what you want. Just don't do this." Harris paused, but didn't turn around. "It's too late for that, Mr. Sterling. This isn't about money anymore. This is about justice." The door slammed shut behind him, leaving Caleb alone in the room, his heart pounding in his chest. For the first time in his life, Caleb realized he wasn't in control. He was just another man facing the consequences of his own actions. And Audrey? Audrey had orchestrated it all. She had known how to bring him down. She had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and now, with a single call to the FBI, she had destroyed him. The cold steel of the handcuffs pressed against Caleb's wrists as he was led through the sterile, gray hallways of the Federal Detention Center. The familiar hum of fluorescent lights overhead did nothing to comfort him, and the distant sounds of doors slamming and guards shouting felt like an endless reminder of just how far he had fallen. This wasn't the world he had known, the world where he held all the cards. Now he was just another inmate, a number among thousands, lost in a sea of consequences. Every step he took felt like it brought him closer to the abyss, closer to the realization that his life, everything he had worked for, was slipping through his fingers. The halls felt narrower, the walls closing in on him with every passing second. The security guard beside him didn't say a word, his face impassive as they walked. Caleb wanted to scream, to demand answers, but he knew it wouldn't matter. No one cared. The reality of the situation was overwhelming. He had always thought of himself as untouchable, a man above the rules, a man who could manipulate his way out of anything. But now, as he was escorted into the holding cell, the gravity of his situation hit him like a ton of bricks. The cell was small, cold, and unwelcoming. A single metal bed with a thin mattress, a small table bolted to the floor, and a toilet in the corner. There were no windows, only the flickering light above him. Caleb stood in the middle of the room, staring at the bare walls, feeling a cold emptiness settle in his chest. The world outside felt so far away now. He couldn't remember the last time he had felt so alone, so utterly powerless. He collapsed onto the bed, burying his face in his hands as his mind raced. Audrey. She had won. She had planned this entire thing, orchestrated every move with surgical precision. And now, she was living her life, running the company he had built, while he sat here, alone, forgotten, a prisoner of his own arrogance. He could still hear her voice in his head, calm and collected as she had laid out her plan. How she had watched him from the sidelines, waiting for him to slip up. She had given him every chance to fix things, to make amends. But he had refused to listen, had pushed her to the brink. And now, she had taken everything from him. The empire, the money, his pride. The cell door clanged open, breaking his thoughts. A guard stepped inside, holding a tray of food. Caleb didn't care about the food. He didn't care about anything anymore. But the guard set it down on the small table before speaking. "Someone's here to see you," the guard said, his tone flat. "You've got 10 minutes. Caleb's head snapped up, a flicker of hope rising in his chest. Who could it be? His lawyer? His father? Maybe even Jessica? But as he stood up and followed the guard down the hallway, the familiar pang of dread settled deep within him. Whoever it was, it wouldn't matter. He was trapped. The visitor's room was small, too. A couple of tables, separated by thick glass, with phones on either side to communicate. Caleb sat down, staring at the figure on the other side of the glass. His eyes widened as the figure came into view. Audrey. She was sitting there, calm and collected, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She didn't look like the woman he had known. Gone was the meek, quiet wife who had always deferred to him. In her place was a woman who exuded power, who held herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had already won. She looked untouchable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Caleb could feel the weight of her gaze on him, steady and unwavering. Finally, he picked up the phone, his voice tight with anger. "Why are you here?" he spat, his words sharp. "Come to rub it in? To watch me squirm in this hellhole you've put me in?" Audrey's lips curved into a slight, almost imperceptible smile. "I'm here because you asked me to come." Caleb's heart skipped a beat. "I didn't ask you to come." "Yes, you did," Audrey replied, her voice cool. "You didn't say it out loud, but you asked me every time you betrayed me, every time you lied to me, every time you ignored me. You asked me to come, and now I'm here. To watch you lose." Her words hit him like a slap to the face, but he refused to let her see how much they hurt. He had always been the one in control. He had always been the one who made the rules. But now, as he sat here in this cold, sterile room, he realized just how much he had underestimated her. "You think you've won, don't you?" Caleb said, trying to keep his voice steady. You think you've beaten me. But I built this company. I made it what it is. And you destroyed it. Audrey interrupted, her voice firm. You destroyed everything. You used it for your own gain, for your ego. You took my father's legacy and turned it into your playground. But now it's mine. It always has been. You just never bothered to ask the right questions. Caleb's mind raced as her words sank in. She had known. Audrey had known everything. She had seen through him, seen his arrogance, his greed, and she had bided her time. She had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the chance to take everything from him. You're nothing without me, Caleb said, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and disbelief. You think you're some kind of genius, some mastermind. But you're just a pawn. A little girl playing dress-up in her father's legacy. Audrey's eyes darkened, but she remained calm. I'm not playing, Caleb. This is my legacy now, and I'm going to make sure it stays that way. A long silence passed between them, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Caleb couldn't speak. He had no more words left. He had no more excuses. He had lost. I wanted you to know, Audrey said, her voice soft but firm, that I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. You had your chance. You had everything. But you couldn't see past your own arrogance. The door opened, and the guard stepped in, signaling the end of their time. Caleb stood up slowly, his mind reeling. Audrey stood as well, her back straight, her eyes never leaving his. I'll be leaving now, Audrey said, her voice cold. I'm not here to make you feel better. I'm here to make sure you understand that you're nothing without the people you betrayed. And now, you're all alone. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Caleb standing in the room, his heart heavy with regret and the weight of his own mistakes. Caleb spent the next few hours in a haze. His mind felt clouded, as if he were trapped underwater, struggling to grasp for air. Audrey's words echoed in his head, over and over again. You're nothing without the people you betrayed. And now, you're all alone. The finality of it all hit him like a tidal wave, crushing him under its weight. He had spent so much of his life believing in his own invincibility, in his ability to control everything around him. But now, as he sat in the cold, impersonal cell, that illusion had shattered. Audrey had destroyed him, not with rage, not with grand gestures, but with calculated precision, like a surgeon removing a cancer, piece by piece. The hours blurred together as Caleb lay on the hard, uncomfortable bed, staring up at the blank ceiling. He couldn't even remember the last time he'd slept or eaten. His body felt heavy, his mind too tired to think straight. All he could do was replay the events of the past few weeks, each one more surreal than the last. His company, his money, his status, all of it was gone. But what truly ate at him, what truly cut the deepest, was the realization that Audrey had always known. She had seen through him long before he even realized it. All the years of lies, all the secrets, all the infidelities, it had all led to this. He had tried to justify it in his mind, tried to tell himself that it was all just business, that he was doing what he had to do to survive. But now, in the stillness of the cell, he couldn't lie to himself anymore. He had been selfish. He had been a fool. And the worst part? Audrey had been right all along. The door to the cell clanged open, snapping Caleb out of his thoughts. He sat up, squinting as a guard stepped inside, holding a stack of papers. Visitor, the guard muttered, throwing the papers onto the table. Caleb frowned. Visitor? He hadn't expected anyone. Certainly not someone he cared to see. But the guard didn't wait for an answer. He stepped out, leaving Caleb alone with the papers. Confused and curious, Caleb stood up and walked over to the table. As he flipped through the documents, his stomach tightened. They were legal papers, more paperwork for his divorce. But there was something different about this stack, something that didn't sit right in his gut. Then, as he turned the last page, his eyes widened in shock. It was a letter from Jessica. Jessica, I'm sorry. I never wanted it to be this way. I know I've been a part of the lie, and I know I played a part in all of this. But I need to be honest with you, Caleb. When you first hired me, I was just a girl looking for a job. But I got caught up in the power, in the thrill of it all. You treated me like I was special, like I was the one who mattered. And for a while, I believed you. But somewhere along the way, I started to see the cracks. You were never really with me. You were always with her, always with Audrey. I saw the way you treated her, the way you dismissed her like she was just some ornament on your arm. I was angry at first. I was hurt. But then I realized something. I'm not the problem. You are. You never saw me for who I really was. You never understood how much I cared, how much I was willing to sacrifice. But you know what? I've realized that I deserve better than you. I deserve more than the lies, the cheating, the manipulation. I hope you understand this. Caleb, I'm walking away. Not just from you, but from everything you represent. I'm taking my life back, and I won't be a part of your mess anymore. Goodbye. Jessica. Caleb felt the blood drain from his face as he sat down heavily on the bed. Jessica. She was walking away too. His hands shook as he read the letter again, the finality of it hitting him harder than any punishment he had faced so far. She was done with him. She was no longer his assistant, his lover, his ally. She was gone. It felt like another piece of his soul had been ripped out, leaving him hollow. He had once thought that Jessica was just a convenience, another woman to fill the space Audrey left behind. But now, sitting in this prison, he realized the truth. Jessica had been more than just a fling. She had been his escape, his momentary relief from the suffocating life he had built. And now, she was gone too. The door opened again, and this time, Caleb didn't look up. He didn't care who it was. He didn't care about anything anymore. But the voice that greeted him made him sit up straight, his heart racing in his chest. Caleb. He looked up, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. Standing in the doorway, looking down at him, was Audrey, the woman who had stripped him of everything. She stood there, regal and composed, as if she had just walked into a meeting, not the prison where her ex-husband was being held. She was dressed in a sharp black suit, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, her makeup flawless. Audrey had always been beautiful, but now, in this moment, she looked untouchable. She looked like the queen she had always been. Are you here to gloat? Caleb spat, his voice thick with bitterness. Audrey didn't flinch. She simply stepped inside and closed the door behind her, sitting down across from him. No, she said softly, her voice cold but not unkind. I'm here to offer you something. Caleb raised an eyebrow, confused. What could you possibly offer me now? I'm not here to offer you sympathy, Caleb, Audrey said. You've had your chance. But I am offering you a way out. A way to salvage whatever's left of your dignity. He stared at her, confused and suspicious. What's the catch? No catch, Audrey said, her lips curving into a small, almost imperceptible smile. I want you to sign the papers. The ones I gave you earlier. The divorce papers. Uncontested. No fight. No drama. Caleb's heart skipped a beat. You want me to just let you have it all? To sign everything away? To give up everything? Audrey nodded, her gaze unwavering. It's the only way you're going to get out of this with any shred of dignity. The FBI won't stop. Your assets are already frozen. You'll be under investigation for the rest of your life. But if you sign, you'll get a clean slate. You'll get to move on with what little is left of your life. No more punishment. No more public shame. Caleb sat back, his hands clenched into fists. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. She was offering him an escape, but at what cost? And if I don't sign? He asked, his voice low. If you don't, Audrey said, standing up, then I'll hand over the second drive. The one that contains everything. And then, there won't be a chance for you to ever get back up. Caleb looked at her, his mind racing. He could see it now, the only way out. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the empire. It was about survival. He was broken, and this was his last chance to get out of this with something left. With a heavy sigh, he stood up, his legs unsteady as he walked over to the desk. Audrey slid the pen toward him. This is the end, Caleb, she said quietly. Sign it, or let everything you've ever worked for go to waste. Caleb stared at the papers, his hands shaking as he reached for the pen.